Hello, everybody. Welcome to today, and it's nice to be back up here doing this presentation. For those who don't know me, I'm Tony Foggett, CEO of Co-Computer Love. We're one of the digital agencies in Manchester Digital. We have just under 90 people, and more recently, actually, we've just been acquired by MediaCom, we're part of the WPP group, so we're now part of a much bigger group of people. And you know, just like everybody in the room, or certainly everybody with a Manchester membership, our business is built on skills and the provision of the right kind of people for us to do what we do. I'm going to take you through the audit today, analysis of a questionnaire that we put out amongst our membership, and in terms of the sort of shape of that membership, probably the first place to start. This chart shows the type of businesses that make up Manchester Digital. In truth, there haven't been many significant changes from 2016, although there is a drop-off of some decline really in consultancy of freelance. The smaller companies probably overtaken more by software development companies. But ultimately, large corporate organisations who are in need of our support services are on the increase and joining the organisation, and that probably just reflects the wider community here in Manchester. Digital agencies like myself really only represent about 25% of Manchester Digital now, and when you add together the product development, technology providers, corporate with a digital function, the actual normal businesses actually. And digital is representative of the kind of way that digital pervades its way across the city. We asked them of those organisations whether their business has grown in the last 12 months, and overwhelmingly the response was yes. So that's positive news. 83% of those reported growth, and then we asked them how many additional roles have they therefore recruited purely due to that business growth. Companies have recruited less people actually in 2016 than in 2015. Though we know from various sources that there are huge numbers of open vacancies for digital and tech jobs within the city. It would appear that those jobs often are remaining open for a number of months as new roles are coming in place. So there's basically a continual need. What staggers me here is probably some of the numbers at the end of this chart. So that still 3.5% reported taking on 51 to 100 people, and 7% are more than 100. And that's potentially representative of some of those organisations that moved into the city, which really driving the probably underlying story of a few of the different facts and figures that we have here today. The most significant functions in average digital business, unsurprisingly, I suppose, the vast majorities who responded in the survey have a broad mix of skills, very much like my own. But however, development and client service were considered to be the most important functions within their business. And that probably is, I suppose, endemic of the more technical and product development side of the membership, but followed by marketing and creative. And in 2016, we look at the gender split. This is another really interesting trend we're seeing here. That whilst we reported that men still dominated digital and technology workplaces, there was a much healthier split back in 2016 of 60-40. This year, that's now actually looking at like the 72 to 28 split, male to female, and this is much worse when we then look at that gender diversity in technical roles, which is also has declined. This figure was at 70-30 last year. Half of all respondents, 50% of all the respondents said their tech teams were 100% male. Bearing in mind that some of those organisations are smaller organisations, it's probably easier to understand, but in truth, this is, I recognise this even within my own organisation. From Philip, that gender picture looks accurate. It was interesting. I had a group of young students from my son's primary school. They're digital leaders. I'm ashamed to say my son wasn't one of them. And nobody tweet that, please. But there were 12 of them, and every single one was a girl. And I don't know whether that really is sort of suggests the opportunity that's there, or actually suggests the scariness of the fact that we're losing that interest from that point of view right up to the point where we can get them fascinated and wanting to work within this industry. But certainly this is the opportunity for the city, I think, really. When we come to talent and skills, and sort of go down a level into the detail of this, we asked how many of your workforce have relocated from outside London and North West. Obviously, the majority of talent in our businesses is sourced locally, but London is the most popular location for our businesses to source their staff, which is great also to hear and, well, to know that we've been also focusing on that from Manchester Digital's perspective. There is also a reliance on European talent to bolster the regional talent pool. And we will remain to see, I suppose, as the changes come in place, what effect that's going to have in a community that's already struggling for the right talent. Any barriers in the way of this is an issue. Our own organisation just came up against some problems with the Home Office. Apparently, user experience is not on the list of skills that are in short demand. And there seems to be a disconnect in terms of their understanding of what the need is and what issues are. So we had to sadly say goodbye to somebody who it took us 3 months to find. In terms of how do you source new talent, internal recommendation and peer recommendation continue to be the most popular methods for finding new talent, closely followed by headhunting and LinkedIn advertising. And it's a trend that's continued this year. The least effective methods are advertising nationally, regionally, using recruitment agencies and CV database searching. Networking and social media also featured in the list in the least effective methods for the first time. My own personal organisation has flipped from probably 80-20 reliance on recruitment to internal recommendation to 80% now. This last year came from peer-to-peer recommendation, and I mean that's actually what we target certainly our internal teams on. But ultimately, I suppose it's testament to the way that our engineering teams are working and the kind of environment we've created, I guess. In terms of the most difficult roles to fill, 4 most difficult roles are, again, you wouldn't be unsurprised to say, developer, far and away the hardest role to fill. But the picture is becoming nuanced. There is a high demand for specialist data and insight type roles. And that's probably not surprising in that we're in an era of optimization, probably really of continual iteration now. So ultimately, the sort of methodologies that people are employing to develop their platforms and websites are much more about incremental improvement. So understanding what's happening on those platforms, analyzing the data, and then making those improvements. I think probably some of the roles that's perhaps missing here, to mention, it's interesting being an agency is often we augment the skills that the traditional companies have within their own 4 walls, and that's probably a signpost to some of the skills that are coming down the line in terms of where the need's growing. Things that I would add to the list probably don't really show up here are things like product owner. We've shifted most of our project management roles into away really now. We've actually, the teams tend to be led by somebody called a product owner, which is a sort of a mix of someone with product management type capacity, but much more strategic capability to think about where the platform or website is heading. CRO, so conversion rate optimization, is even though not necessarily in huge numbers, is still a very difficult role to fill now. And those guys are commanding huge inflation in terms of their roles, their salaries, and there's a lot of bun fighting for conversion rate optimization specialists, which are very aligned, to be honest, to those data analyst type roles. User experience still very difficult, and again, something in huge demand, as well as testers as well, actually. Generally speaking, there aren't courses producing testers, so it's a role that people move into after demand. So just a couple of other bits of detail, I suppose, to add to that. In terms of some detail on the technology side, we asked respondents which tech they were using, and they were asked to choose multiple languages where they struggled to find developers to fill the roles. JavaScript, because I suppose no matter what then back-end development you're working on, JavaScript as the front-end layer is relevant to everybody. But PHP also tops the charts. A number of large companies, Zuto, AutoTrader, etc., who use those, have moved into the Manchester in the last couple of years and certainly exacerbated demand. Python saw worldwide growth last year, so it's no surprise, I suppose, that to see it moving up the ranks for Northwest businesses. And 2017 sees Swift making its first appearance on the list. Other mentions include Perl and React.js. In terms of which skill sets will grow in importance, I may have got ahead of this to some extent, but most interesting shift is the increase in interest in data and analyst roles. As I mentioned, that really sort of is endemic of that shift to that iterative improvement and optimization. The demand for these types of roles is growing across all types of companies. So I think a conversion rate optimization specialist is something you'd like to see as an in-house skill, whether at agency or not, very quickly. As has been the case for a number of years, developer took the top slot once again, but digital marketing crept further up the table, gaining 2 places than last year. And as with previous data from 2017, we've seen more interest in data and analyst roles. So in terms of some information about retention of employees and the ways that people are going about that. In 2016, 44% of companies had inflated salaries compared to 2015, which was 51%. But unfortunately, the figure is on the rise again, which probably is no real surprise when basically demand is outstripping supply. This is largely due to the skills shortage in the region and the larger companies increasing salaries to attract mid-senior level talent. But also as people are moving into the city or undertaking bigger, I suppose, transformational projects, there comes with them a lot of pressure to achieve those things and in a short amount of period of time. So they will take on people and inflate salaries. Certainly anecdotally, I've heard companies just matching the same for freelance wages as regular salaries. So certainly this is it still staggers me that in fact there is still a gap between what we need, bearing in mind that these guys are paid so well. But it's basically another great year to work in digital and technology industries. Our salary benchmarking exercise, which we will release later in the year, is going to provide a lot more detail on this. But wages rose by 10% across the industry, way more so in some of those roles of demand, such as developer. And in terms of what they're actually paying, I have to admit I really don't recognise the lower ends of these. So I'd like to know which companies are getting away with those. But I certainly somewhere in between those two figures is what we would see as the kind of normal, and is reflective in pretty much the average that's appearing there across the board. Senior developer looks a little bit low to me at 43%. Sorry, £43,000. And in fact, again, there is a shift really in investing in the much more sort of senior individuals within the team. And they seem to be the people that are much more in short supply really at the moment. I mentioned team. Our organisation is structured into sort of into individual teams where they kind of look after themselves. Not all organisations are like that. Some are quite departmental. Mine isn't. We talked about what additional benefits are offered to attract and retain staff. These statistics don't really illustrate much change from 2016's audit results. With career development and flexible hours still featuring at the top of the list. However, social benefits are now seen as more important than offering a flexible working location and ability to work. On favoured tech has crept from 10th place last year. I think, you know, a lot of these things ultimately can't replace actually having the right environment and the right kind of culture. The list of benefits, I think ultimately people can become just snowblinded to that. I think there's nothing that quite really replaces actually allowing your people to work, to do the right thing and work in the way that they want to work or know is the right way to work. So actually probably as much as anything it's about some of the using progressive techniques and progressive ways of working that seems to be attracting members of staff and retaining them. In terms of outsourcing and contracting, businesses in the region are continuing to use contract workers for job roles such as developer, project manager, infrastructure specialist, I've got a list here, data analyst, creative, etc. The number of outsourced developers has dropped by 5% since 2016, and project management a slight increase to around 2%. But the quality, experience and maturity of development teams in locations such as Eastern Europe has seemed to have really ramped up in the last few years, meaning that larger contracts with added elements such as PM are being outsourced. Anecdotally, that was some of the feedback that came through. In my own organisation, we've had a significant drop in the amount of contract staff we use and outsourcing. So this has been a year where we've used the least amount of internal people, really only ever using them to facilitate perhaps initial team setup or growth. And choosing instead to essentially have overcapacity within our teams. So I don't really necessarily recognise that picture, but I'm clearly just an audience of one. In terms of offshoring, we asked this question for the first time in 2016, have you offshored or shipped in talent from outside of the EU? And 26% has responded that they had outsourced from outside of the EU. We anticipate this would be a growing trend for the next 4 to 5 years. However, this year, that figure actually has dropped to just 18%. Of the 18% who said yes, the vast majority reported that they had outsourced developer roles. Some also reported outsourcing client service roles, which related to more global business development and localization, really, which is kind of related to that. I think, yeah, and again, I mentioned this is probably the first time we've seen, or as an organisation, kind of come up against issues of recruiting people from outside of the EU, and it's been a very fascinating learning experience for me. The next question really was: have people turned away work as a result of being unable to find the right talent? Actually. This is a much better picture than I remember seeing in previous years, but 20% of businesses still report that they have turned down work as a result of being unable to find the right talent. It's down another 20% from last year, but it may well be a root cause of that is that over the last couple of years, the makeup of MD is moving away from service-based businesses like ours, where they would have to turn down work, into organisations like Auto Trader, etc., which may go more slowly if they can't find the right people, but not necessarily have to turn down work. In terms of graduates and apprentices, more companies than ever, even some of the smaller ones, are starting their own graduate schemes, which is brilliant news. It's really encouraging because it shows that companies are planning well ahead in terms of developing their own talent. And sort of understanding the need that I suppose, why they need to do that, but hopefully seeing that the role it plays in adding to the bigger picture. So we still 86% of I suppose unsurprisingly, 6% of our members are recruiting graduates and 24% running their own schemes. And over 55% of those respondents recruit a quarter of their graduate talent from local universities. And this is up by 11% from last year's figures. And hopefully some of the initiatives like Talent Day are really helping. It's brilliant to see the numbers of students that we're getting through the door to connect to the industry, and the kind of connection that the local universities are making with Manchester Digital. This figure is slightly up from 2016 in terms of those companies that took on an apprentice. 50% of membership took on an apprentice last year. And of that number, 80% of those felt that the apprentices met expectation. For those who said the apprentices didn't meet expectations, apparently the generous cited reasons were that the kind of quality of the training provision wasn't good enough, or that the apprentices wasn't work ready. Certainly nothing I came across when we've taken apprentices which has been really successful. But when looking actually at whether the apprenticeship levy will affect your business and asking that question, it's interesting that I suppose nearly 6% felt it wouldn't. Businesses with a payroll of 3 million will have to obviously pay the 0.5% of their wage bill into a levy from May this year, which can then be claimed back through the hiring of apprentices. If not spent, obviously it's going into a pot to help fund apprenticeships for smaller businesses. There is still a lot of uncertainty from our membership and from businesses on how this will roll out. In fact, actually later today, it's worth signposting. There's a seminar within the conference if you want to go and find out a bit more detail about that. In terms of whether that levy is going to be good news, of the 20% that said they didn't think it was, the majority believe that it wouldn't be because it might affect actually whether there were roles for graduates. So there already are actually a number of graduates in the market and not finding work after university. And so if organisations are being coerced into recruiting apprenticeships, is that going to get in the way of us actually helping those graduates who maybe just need that extra step up into employment to take those initial first steps? And certainly that's undoubtedly going to be a knock-on. In terms of some summary of that then, and just some of I suppose some of the things we've seen, there's a couple of strands and I suppose themes that are coming through there. Nothing does tend to change too quickly in terms of skills development or something solving of the problem, although there are clearly one of the things that is changing quickly is some of the roles and needs at the kind of sharper end. The picture is still fairly bleak, unfortunately. I'm not going to go into too much detail about the findings as the panel after tea will be kind of discussing this in more detail. And Katie's also going to be giving you more information throughout the day. But some of the themes really coming through is clearly that continuation of the above wage inflation, something I absolutely have seen within our own organisation. A worsening gender gap, and particularly in relation to technical roles. Clearly an opportunity for us to actually tackle some of the issues within the supply. More opportunities developing their own more companies developing their own graduate schemes and recruiting apprentices, just as the industry matures and starts to actually, I suppose, up its game really. And less businesses turning away work due to lack of talent, but possibly to do with the makeup of Manchester Digital as a whole. But mostly, a really a positive response to the apprenticeship levy on the whole. And that really concludes the information really, I suppose, from the report itself. Is there any questions at this stage? I'm not sure I'll be able to answer them, but you go ahead. Why they were positive about the apprenticeship levy? Do you have a... I have my own view, but...
Because employers felt that it was about investing in young people, so it's pretty much all that people felt they should be investing in young people at that age and developing the pipeline.
Might also have something to do with the wording of the question, which is, well, you know, did you think it was a good thing, or was it going to be a bad thing, rather? Most people said no. Well, we asked them if it was going to be, whether we thought it was going to be a bad thing, and majority of them said no, it wasn't going to be a bad thing, but they weren't necessarily expressing a huge amount of positivity for it. Any other questions? As I say, there is a debate that, later on in the day to discuss this further. So actually, in that case, and there is also a summary of this, as Katie mentioned, in this little document that I'm waving around, and I have been waving around. So please take that back and have a look at in more detail. And thanks again for turning up. It's on a personal note. This day fills me with a lot of encouragement as we bring our sector to this space to tackle this issue, but also really start working together with the educational sector and the kind of very people that really can tackle this problem. So thanks for coming, and that's me. Before I go, I'm just going to hand over to Navroza, who's the next on the list from DCMS, who is going to be talking about what those guys are doing to tackle this. So thanks very much.